can I pass what I call my mirror test? Did I show up?
Hello there, it's me, Steve Mellor, and welcome in to GrowthReady, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. On this episode, I get to reconnect with an old friend and one of the leading performance coaches in the UK, Ric Moylan. And as you will come to learn, Ric sees growth through the lens of reality. Because after navigating some of the best athletes in sport and the biggest decision makers in business to reach the top of their game, Ric understands that true growth comes from knowing the person you see in the mirror every night as someone that is giving their all and ready to make the most of any chance they get. This episode is brought to you by Scribe, the workflow AI platform that automatically turns any process into a beautiful shareable guide in seconds. Say goodbye to manual screenshots or typing out step-by-step instructions and join the already 4 million people working 15 times faster with Scribe. Get started today at scribehow.com. That's scribehow.com. Hello there and welcome into the most recent installment of the GrowthReady podcast. I am so excited to be chatting it up with someone across the pond this morning, and it's always nice when I get a fellow Brit on the show, is because my accent just slowly moves back into that of a Northwestern English guy, whereas typically, my family and friends in the UK make fun of my American twangs. Hopefully they disappear a little bit within my conversation today with my longtime friend Ric Moylan is joining us. And Ric, before we get into maybe some of the history of our relationship and certainly get to learn so much about you and all the great insights I know you're going to be contributing to us today, answer for our listeners, what does it mean to you to be growth ready?
Hey Steve, being growth ready for me is all about seizing opportunities when they come along. When opportunity knocks, it's not always the most convenient time. You don't always have the absolute skill set for that opportunity. You may not be in the perfect place in life, but being growth ready is about adapting, it's about pivoting, and it's about seizing opportunities when they come.
I love it. And again, I know so much about you already and know that there's actually some really, really beautiful alignments there with just the work that you do in the way you answered that question. And as I just said to you before we pressed record, that, you know, we've known each other for many years through the world of sport. And I think what's fascinating about your world of sport is that predominantly it came from the world of boxing. And when I just hear that way that you respond there, my mind cannot help but go to that of a fighter, you know, straight away. And so I would love for you to maybe just almost piggyback now off of that way that you responded the question to, you know, the world that you're most familiar with in that of boxing, and maybe how we as non-boxers can potentially, you know, better understand some of that insight that you just provided.
Yeah, perhaps we'll loop back to this at some point. But in our world in sport, we're trying to prepare as best as we can. We're trying to prepare the athlete as best as we can for the challenges that are ahead, for the challenges that they face. But there's a very famous quote, isn't there? Mike Tyson says, "Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face." And actually, I think what high performance, whatever that is, what being the best we can be, what that often looks like for all of us day-to-day life. It's about being good at the things that we're prepared for. It's about being good at the things that are expected. But actually, how our best shows is when something comes along that we're a little unprepared for, that we didn't see coming, that's unexpected, that knocks us sideways, that punches us in the face, metaphorically speaking. I think that's when you find out who you are, you find out who your character is. You find out when we often with our clients, maybe I'm going ahead here, but we talk goals, visions, all that kind of stuff. Well, it's in those unexpected moments when you the chips are down and your back's against the wall that you really find out if those goals that you said you wanted, you actually do want them. Those visions that you said that you had, you're actually clear and connected to those visions. So I think combat's a brilliant metaphor, boxing, MMA, combat, because there's always something unexpected that even the punches in the face that we do expect. A lot of the professionals that I've worked with will tell you, they'll make an often funny statement, but it's actually very real. They'll say, I expected to get punched, but I didn't expect it to hurt that much.
Yeah.
So I think it's in those times that we then find out who we are.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate just how you're building upon that initial response now of just it's one thing to seize an opportunity when it comes, but what are you going to do when the opportunity is unexpected or the moment that you're in was not planned? It's one thing to have this phenomenal plan, a great strategy, a season that seems to be making sense and been going just exactly how you planned for it to go, but then suddenly it's derailed in some way, shape, or form. In some way, it's not what you were planning for it to be. Can you still see that as an opportunity as opposed to maybe the wall, the hurdle that now suddenly seems, or the mountain that now suddenly seems it's too big of a climb, it's too big of an ask? And what you're suggesting here is that the opportunities that we maybe plan for, well, those are the things we're expected to sort of seize and go through. But what you do when that opportunity is not the one that you planned for and does not seem ideal, that's actually going to be the making of you in the long term, right?
Absolutely. How many times have we heard an athlete or come out with statements like, I want to be a world champion, or a potential high performer or future high performer say, I want to be rich, I want to be a millionaire. But actually, what being a world champion is, or what being a millionaire is it's not that belt above your head, or it's not that fast car. It's actually the early starts, the late finishes, the sacrifices, the digging in. And I think one of the statements that people have often said to me, which I'm sure you probably had said to yourself, is it must be great working with people in sport. And I say, why is that? And they say, because they love training. And I say, do they? Do they?
Right.
Yeah, they love what they do. They love training. There's almost this assumption that they're motivated, and actually, more often than not, as you know as well as I do, they're human, and they have days when they just don't feel like it. And it's in those days, it's in those times that we find out if the things that we want, world champion, money, success, whatever that looks like to us, if that is what we really want.
Yeah. And again, I'm grinning the whole time while you're saying this. It's just, I have more memories of having to convince an athlete to do something than I do of watching an athlete do it willingly, and that's the human experience. Again, if that is news and a surprise to someone who's not been in the highest level of sport, then I'm here to tell you that whatever respective field that you operate in at the highest level, what you're experiencing there, it really is no different in sport. And I think, to your point, the one thing I will say that athletes do so well is that they embrace that part. They embrace the fact that it's not going to be easy, but two, there's going to be days where they know they are less than what they probably need on that day. And the question is, what can you pull from yourself? What can you get from yourself on that day? Because as you know, those are the days that make the difference. It's not that when we're feeling brilliant and we're doing everything without our coach having to ask us, that's actually not the day that's going to define whether or not you become a world champion. It's the days when the last thing you want to do is put the gloves on or step into the pool, as it was for me. Like that, those are the days that make the difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely that.
And I think now is a great time for us to really come into the here and now and the work that we're doing, because again, we've both at some point, and you probably had this transition before I did, but we've had this transition where we've taken these concepts and taken this experience that we've had in the world of sport, and we've moved into the boardroom, so to speak, into the C-suite, however you want to put it. And you already gave a couple of insights there of just, what it's like to maybe help folks see things differently and through this lens of sport. I'm curious, mate, when you go back and you think about some of those early days when you first said, I'm gonna go flirt with this world outside of sport and see what that's like. What were some of those initial conversations that you had when it came to, let's say, simply getting some of these basic concepts that we are all too familiar with in the world of sport sort of into the boardroom and get people more comfortable with this type of perspective, I guess? Yeah,
and it aligns with how we started the podcast today, because I delivered a bunch of seminars to health and fitness professionals. I delivered a bunch of meetings, coaching sessions, all that kind of stuff in my life. I was fairly seasoned at getting up and doing talks about sports science or about biomechanics or about any of the stuff that we kind of formerly used to do. And a friend of mine actually approached me, and he ran a large sales organization, and he said to me, he said, I'd really love it. We've got some challenges in the business right now. He was very, very into personal development and whatnot like that. And he said, I'd really love it if you were to come in and do a talk for our sales team. And then, depending on the level of engagement and success and the feedback and all that kind of stuff, we'll then talk about how that looks and where it goes from there. And I said, great. Going back to what we started with, I said, great. I'll happily do it. I'm really looking forward to it. And then straight away I thought, what am I going to talk about?
Right.
What am I going to talk about to a bunch of salespeople? And so I let it absorb as you kind of do, and sat down and I went back to this gentleman, and we started to ask some critical questions about the challenges within the business. And whilst the situation was different, the actual physiological, psychological challenge, the emotional challenge, it was almost exactly the same. It was, performing under pressure. It was hitting targets or having deadlines or having a North Star, as I call it, to work towards, whether that's a target, whether that's an event. It was dealing with stress. It was controlling that inner voice that tends to deviate more towards we can't do it than we can. Mm-hmm. And so I put a talk together. I'd never done it before. I didn't really have an idea. I was fairly confident, but you hope it's going to be well received. Mm-hmm. And I thought, what are the principles, the high performance principles that elite sports people do? I'd done a little bit of work in the military as well, and with the police force or some of the police forces in the UK. What are the principles, or perhaps a better word for it? And I digress here, by the way, but my dad's an engineer and he can fix anything. And even though he's retired, he can still fix absolutely anything. I'm useless, Steve. If I put your shelf up for you, it's going to fall off. Yep. So I have this conversation with my dad. I say, Dad, you're brilliant at fixing things. And he said to me, son, of course I know what to do. He says, but ultimately, in order to fix things, I need the right tools for the job. And that stuck with me.
Yeah.
And when I talk about these high performance principles, what I mean is the tools for the job. So what are the tools for the job of an athlete? Of course, they've got the elements of skill, or the pieces in the jigsaw as another analogy metaphor that I like to use. Of course, they've got their skill. They have to be able to box or, throw a ball or whatever it looks like. But that's not the only piece in the jigsaw in sport. We know that. And we give them the other tools, the other pieces in the jigsaw to enable performance. These salespeople know how to sell. But that's not the only piece in the jigsaw. That's not the only tool that they need in the toolbox. So I started to really look at it and think, actually, how can I help them build the toolkit that helps them perform at their highest level, be the best version of themselves, whatever that looks like, different individuals. But also, how are they also able to then compartmentalize, have some boundaries, and actually then, when work's done, have this thing called a life and enjoy their life as well.
Yeah, there's a thoroughness to what you were putting out there with that sales team when you stepped into that world for the first time that is so necessary. Again, I've learned this quickly in the 3.5 years of the work I'm doing and with the businesses I work with, is that it's really easy for them to look at things through the lens of the industry or the skill set that is wanted within that industry in terms of what you would maybe put on a job description or whatever it might be. But then when we get someone in like yourself, you've come from a world where you have to consider every influence on the end product, on the end result. And I think that's where, as you were describing that, my mind went to straight away. It's just like the thoroughness of considering how big is the toolbox. I mean, if you thought it was just 4 or 5 things, let me introduce you to these 10 over here that you've never even thought of before. And then you start to explain and walk through people the way in which their limiting beliefs can influence the way in which they pick up a phone and ask a question, whatever it is. There's so many different potential influences, and to use your term, so many potential tools that we could be considering. And simply just for someone like you to come in and say, look how vast this actually is, and how much you could be considering that you've not even thought of before. I'm curious, how have you found folks within all the respective industries you've now worked in? How do you find they handle this idea of, oh wait, there's all these tools over here that I hadn't even thought of? Like, how is that received?
I think if you'd have asked me this question perhaps 6 or 8, 10 years ago, it would have been a slightly different answer. I think actually the world of personal development and the world of taking care of yourself and understanding that foundations of health, for example, how that leads to performance and high performance, I think people have got a little bit more of a grasp on that. But but it's kind of case by case, and what it comes down to often is company culture. So I love working on the ground in a business. I love rolling my sleeves up and getting stuck in and getting stuck in with the troops, so to speak, who are digging in and making the sales or servicing clients, whatever that looks like. But then equally, we have to work from the top down, because there is still often, certainly in the UK, post-COVID, things have changed, I think, for everybody. But historically, there was some working methodologies, some sort of beliefs within a business that I would argue no longer are getting the best out of staff in the real world. So I think it's case by case. You've still got people who are set in their ways. You'll always have people who are set in their ways. You'll always have people who are a little resistant to change or a little fearful of something new. But actually, that's also, in my mind, a great opportunity to test my skills, but also to see then the change and to see the evolution of person A, who perhaps was a little nervous or a little fearful, and to see them then embrace growth, embrace change, and to look at the journey they've they've gone on then, whether that's 6, 12, 18 months later, whatever the timeline is, it's massively rewarding. So yeah, I think for me it differs depending on where you're at, but ultimately the challenge is the same. Companies want to make money. Athletes want to win games or matches or fights or whatever that is. We're all in a results world, of course, but actually I think when we really connect to the human element of it, that looking after our staff, that making sure they're healthy but making sure they're happy, same as an athlete. You know, do we force them to train that day, or do we actually bend a little bit and find a place of happiness with them? That's what's true high performance. That's what's, yes, it's about the bottom line, but actually it's about our people. Do they love coming to work? Are they connected? Are they bought in? That the athlete, yes, they want to win that world title, but then when they look back, will they also look back not only with pride, but also look back and say, I loved that journey?
Yeah. I want to come back to the healthy and happiness as the North Star, as the way in which we maybe describe true high performance. But there's a word that you've used a few times now that I want to dive into for a little bit here, is that of just the word work, like what it means to really work. And again, this may almost, when I say that, it may almost say, well, it sounds like Steve's trying to challenge this whole healthy, happy thing that Ric's selling here right now. But I think this is why it's so important for us to touch on why the two can coexist. Is that I think there is, for some reason, it's like either I pick the hard work or I pick the happiness. And I think that is one of the most common narratives out there when it comes to high performance, or when it comes to just simply finding fulfillment and content in what it is you do. And I would love to use this conversation as an opportunity just to simply make the argument for work, because I think work sometimes gets a bad rep in terms of what it means to truly do hard work, and how it can exist with fulfillment, with joy, with happiness, etc. So I'm just curious, mate, when you think about the way in which you're maybe selling or pitching or just simply developing the mindset around what it means to work, whether it be an athlete, whether it be within an organization, where do you start with that? Where does the conversation begin when it comes to just simply saying to someone, hey, this is what it means to work. Let me help you understand what I mean by work.
Yeah. Before I fully answer that, I've, like perhaps you yourself as well and many others, a statement I've heard is that I manifested, and I'll often challenge that with my clients, and I'll say, okay, brilliant, and I'm a believer in the principle of manifestation. But for me, there's a caveat on the end of it, and I say to my clients, and it's a term that you'll hear me say to them all the time: you manifested it, brackets, then you did the work, close brackets. So in my mind, the work it's a process. It's something that has to be done. Of course, we've got the goal, we've got the North Star, the vision, but then it's about, particularly with, whether that's with an athlete or an individual, it's about, what do the small steps look like? What do the small steps look like each day? What do the small steps look like on a week by week basis? What is success? What are the small successes that we can take each week? But then also having an understanding that we're not going to be happy every single day of our life. It's simply part of the journey. It's not. We're not going to enjoy absolutely everything that we have to do, but sometimes there are necessary processes that get us somewhere. I don't enjoy doing my accounts. I don't enjoy paying the tax man or the IRS, as you call it over.
I just have actually about 3 weeks ago. It wasn't fun. It wasn't nice.
Lucky you. I don't enjoy either of those two things. I don't enjoy doing the small tasks that it takes to keep good accounts, but I enjoy that more than if I don't do it, and therefore I then get a huge bill from the tax or the IRS. So I think it's a case of understanding and accepting and agreeing that actually training an athlete, making a sale, that we want to make a sale, we want commission, and then beyond that we want holidays, experiences, houses, clothes, all the kind of things that hopefully somebody who works in sales is probably a little bit money connected and likes tangible stuff. But actually, what are the steps that are going to lead us to that? And what are the kind of necessary steps that the cold calls, for example? You ask most of them, do they like doing cold calls? Well, the answer would be no. But when they understand that it's part of the process, that if they give their all to, which I'm now going to answer your question properly in a second, it's gonna lead them to the outcome that they want. In order to achieve all of that, we have to create a personal code, a personal set of standards, i.e. how do we show up each day, i.e. what are our non-negotiables, what are our personal code principles every single day. So I have chores that I have to do in the house, Steve, as I'm sure you do. I have parenting chores that I don't enjoy doing, but we show up and we do them to the best of our capability. Some days are better than others. We're not always perfect, but as part of our personal code, we show up and we do it. A lot of things such as parenting are unconscious. You don't want to get up in the night when a baby's crying,
Right.
but you do it.
Yep.
So for me, it's an agreement. It's working on what outcomes do we want, what outcomes are we working towards, what does success look like for us, and then it's about an agreement on the necessary steps that it's going to take to get there. And our role, in my opinion, as a coach, is rather than us giving them the answers, when I find that when they commit to the necessary tasks, of which I'll often challenge them, we're more likely to get buy-in, we're more likely to get the small ticks in the boxes each day if it's something that they've committed and they've agreed and understood are the necessary steps to get you to where you want to be.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of personal code is something that I hope when those words came out, people felt challenged when they heard you say it, because it's potentially one of those terms that can be a catalyst for a person to get serious. You know, that's what I love about it. I think when we get names right, immediately it speaks to exactly what you're signing up for the moment you consider it. And there's something about this term personal code. I love how you align it with agreement too. Agreement is something that, you know, whether it be agreement or commitment, I use those two words almost synonymously within my work with clients. It's like, does this sound like something you can agree to? Does this sound like something you can commit to? And you know, it goes beyond it being simply a goal or an idea or a vision. Suddenly now they've said, yeah. And it's like, oh. This episode of Growth Ready is sponsored by Scribe, the workflow AI platform that makes documenting and sharing processes truly effortless. Folks, when I look at my day, I'm constantly fielding questions from my team. How to pull reports, where to find files, how to set things up. And Scribe has been a total game changer in giving me that time I need back in my day. In a matter of seconds, Scribe turns my workflows into a beautiful, shareable guide, complete with screenshots and text instructions that ensures I no longer waste time in my day with the same repetitive tasks and conversations. Since using Scribe at GrowthReady, I've personally loved how it uses AI to do the work for me by following every click in real time. I can literally see my step-by-step guide being built by Scribe while I create training plans and document workflows to better serve my team. I've saved hours, folks, literally hours in my week by being able to create PDFs or shareable links that I can send to clients in an instant. So I'm asking you, I'm telling you, free yourself and your team from manually documenting processes and join the 94% of the Fortune 500 and 4 million people worldwide already using Scribe to work 15 times faster. So head to scribehow.com. That's scribehow.com undiscomfort.com and start working faster today. Is that accountability I just created?
Yeah, it becomes part of life. It becomes part of who they are, identity. Again, I repeat what I said before. When it's time not to work, it's time not to work. It's time to have fun and so forth like that. But ultimately, when it's time to show up, we show up.
Yeah, and transparently, like I'm actually going through a phase right now where, because I love how we've been able to showcase that, you know, through work sometimes we are absent of happiness just because we are focused on the work. I'm going through one of those phases myself right now, and as recently as last night, I shared with my wife. I just said, "Listen, like this is not a happy time for me right now. It's got nothing to do with you. It's got nothing to do with the kids. Like this is I create sprints in my business. I'm in a sprint right now, and the reason I'm in a sprint right now is I have some things coming up in later this month and in next month that I want to be able to remove myself from the business and appreciate and enjoy those times, like you just alluded to. But it's being attentive enough to what's coming to be able to then assign meaning to what needs to be done now, and that's really what you're getting at here. It's like, am I willing to just simply acknowledge that goal, that vision, that North Star, none of that comes to fruition if I don't get really honest in the moment and just say, from a personal code standpoint, who do I have to show up as consistently to get the outcome that I know I'm capable of getting? And I think that's a part of this too. I'd love for you to give us some insights on as well. Is it's one thing to have a personal code, but we want people to live in the reality of what's possible. How do you maybe work with folks on establishing that personal code in alignment, let's say, with, oh shit, those are some big goals that you've got, you know, how do we maybe get someone to start comprehending for the first time, hey, when it comes to your personal code, when it comes to your day-to-day, there are numerous levels that you need to go up that you're currently maybe not considering?
I think sometimes we have to have an honest conversation. I think sometimes it's a harsh reality. I think it's very easy in life, and if I go back to sport, there's always somebody, not that I spend much time in pubs, just to be clear to people listening, but there's always somebody in a pub who could have been, you know, I could have been a great swimmer. I could have been a great footballer or a great basketball player, whatever. I could have been. And that's a statement that I have heard, you know, on many occasions. Now, of course, there's big curveballs, isn't there? There are major injuries, for example, and that's really tough when you speak to somebody and they've had a multiple knee reconstruction at 15 years old or whatever, of course. But the reality is, for many people, could have been, and again, going back to your question, I'm often confronted with kind of statements and comments and in our sort of goal setting, vision setting, however we want to turn those things, I'm often confronted with statements that are a little bit loose, let's say. I'm gonna develop a property empire. I'm gonna create a property portfolio. That's brilliant. Talk me through the steps required to create a property portfolio. And actually, often, whilst we may have what we think is a big goal, a sort of big, hairy, audacious goal, whatever that term was, actually, not only have many people not got the layers in place, but actually, there's then a realization that they actually don't want to do what is required to get those layers in place.
Right.
That property portfolio starts with getting your first deposit,
right?
Which actually starts with perhaps getting a second job on an evening, or not going out on a weekend to save cash for 12 months of your life. Yeah. And then when you get that first deposit, you're then there, whilst you may have the people doing the fancy stuff in the house, you're wheelbarrowing all the rough stuff, the concrete blocks and the mud, because that's what it actually in real life takes to get your first house over the line, for you then to leverage that and extract some money out, and then you've got to do the exact same again. So for me, in my role, I absolutely want to support my clients. I absolutely want to back them, and I want them to shoot for the stars and all of those things. But equally, I'm doing them a disservice if I don't challenge statements that are made, if I don't challenge throwaway or loose thoughts. I absolutely want you to create a multi-million-pound property empire. But the reality is have you got the infrastructure in place to do so? At this moment in time, probably not. Fine, okay. This is what it takes to build it at step one, which is often really not glamorous, can be quite difficult, and there's going to be times when you're questioning whether you actually really want to do it. Are we prepared to do that? And if we are, I'm here for you.
Yeah. And you're going deeper now with this definition around work. You're really helping us better comprehend. There is power in manifestation. There's power in vision boards. There's power in all of this work. In no way am I ever going to question the power of this, because if it works for one person, it works. That's just the way it is. But the fact of the matter is that while those are nice ideas and things that have worked for some, they're not really the norm. Otherwise, we'd all be walking around with the vision board under our arm. And so it's just like, okay, what does the normal human being need to comprehend to just to simply see progress, and pertaining to this podcast, see growth? How do they see growth specific on a day-to-day, year-to-year basis? There's some really normal elements that we can all be implementing, and one of which is, hey, for every BHAG, every big, hairy, audacious goal that we put out into the world, firstly, to everything that you're saying, Rick, like, get clear on those initial steps, because chances are that big, hairy, audacious goal is so many years into the future that the steps that will come just before you realize it make no sense right now. None whatsoever. And so what are those immediate steps? But something else you're getting to, which I think is very powerful, is that we can sometimes protect ourselves from actually doing the work based on the looseness of the language that we put into the goal. I think you said it so well, that the term looseness is such a great way to put it. Again, when we just say something like multi whatever, it's just like, okay, that doesn't really mean anything. Like, it's just a phrase. You've just used a phrase. It doesn't really tell me exactly what you're going to achieve. It doesn't, most importantly, it doesn't tell you what you're going to achieve. And so it's hard to kind of create any accountability system around that when it comes to the steps. Whereas, to your point in how you question and challenge your clients, I'm very similar. It's just like, okay, I like to just look at them in the face sometimes and be like, I don't know what you mean by that.
Absolutely.
I don't know what you mean by that. When you give me that big, broad idea of a goal, I can't hold you accountable to that, because I really don't understand what it is you're trying to achieve. And I'm just curious, mate, like, when you hear me sort of say that around how we can use those words to almost protect ourselves from doing the work, what comes to mind for you?
I think when you make those kind of statements, I think it's then quite easy to go back to what I was saying before about the person in the pub, because when they're quite loose, they're then often followed with, but, I was going to set up a big property empire, but. I couldn't quite get the funding, and again, it just becomes very loose, nondescript sort of terminology, sort of language. Whereas, where I try and drill down with my clients is, and I give you a fighter as an example. That's what was ringing through my mind. Is again, I want to be a world champion. Okay, well, that's 10 years away. If we're able to follow a specific plan, we get a little bit of luck, blah, blah, because a little bit of luck always plays into all of these things as well. Some might say we earn our luck. I would probably agree with that. The language I'm seeking from my clients is to find enjoyment and happiness in is in a fighter in eating healthy food because they can't have burgers, they can't have, you know, takeaways, they can't go out and drink wine and beer like the majority of their friends. They have to go to bed early. They have to almost be antisocial, but they find happiness in that. They find happiness in the steps of that, and they understand it's a necessary process. That actually one day we may become a world champion, but actually what does that really mean? It's finding fulfillment, and I go back to the personal code in have I given my best today? Have I done everything that's within my control today? When I reflect on my week, and reflection's something that I would always encourage clients to do, can I pass what I call my mirror test, which is I may have been at my absolute peak this week, and that's fine, brilliant. What learnings can I take from that? But actually, I may not have had a peak week in terms of output, results, etc. But did I have a peak week in terms of effort? Did I show up? I go back to those words again. Did I show up? And I think it's very, very easy to make, like we talked about, loose statements, loose comments. For me, it's all about drilling it down, almost reverse engineering it, and actually looking at the day-to-day, at the tick boxes, and finding happiness in the simplest thing. People, here's something that just popped to mind. People will often message me and they'll say, if I've got a professional boxer on the scales or an athlete that's done really, really well yesteryear, can you give me their training program, or can I buy it from you? And I say, well, no, because for a start, it's confidential. But also, you wouldn't want to do the things that they do. To which the retort back is often, yeah, you're right. I bet it's this real extreme, sort of high-level circus type training of all this crazy shit, right? And I'm trying to watch my language, but
you're right.
But actually, no, it's not. It's the really boring stuff, repeated, and the basics done well day in, day out. And for me, with whether that's corporate clients, whether that's a person who's trying to set up their own little business, or whether it's a person trying to be a world champion, whatever, shoot for the stars. Absolutely, I massively support that. But we have to be real on what it takes to get there and what that looks like day to day.
Yeah, typically on the show, I'm trying to always find some of these, like, really clever, creative ways to describe growth through our guests. And sadly, there's one word that comes to mind when you're just talking here, Rick, and I go, growth's pretty boring. Growth's pretty boring at times. Yeah. And that's, I know that, you know that, and there's plenty of people in our world that know that. And I think sometimes just to kind of call it that, like, it's many things. It just happens that one of the things is it can be boring sometimes. It really can. And the monotony of it sometimes, this goes back to where we really started with the conversation. Can you find comfort, to use your word, and I want to go here now, happiness. Can you find happiness, some form of happiness, in some of the monotony that comes with growth? And whether it be a boxer eating healthy in the same plate every single night, or whether it be that person that comes to their desk every morning and has the same first 15-minute routine to ensure they give themselves the best chance to show up and perform at their best that day. It's going to seem really monotonous on day 100, day 200, but if it's working, if it is part of your code to have the chance to simply achieve what it is you're set on achieving, then it's part of it. It's part of what we got to do. So I'd love to transition here to happiness. And I almost want to know a little bit more, just when you think about what was that moment in your life where you realized that, we can do the work, we can pursue the big goal, but we can make space for happiness. We can make space for the joy and all the healthy elements that can come with the growth process as we go. Do you recall maybe a time, or was it a sequence of events where you started to really get that part of the process down too?
I think first off, it's about accepting that depending on what it is you actually want to do, there are certain pathways that almost there's almost not there's not really much deviation from it, and I think that, you know, with the boxer, for example, of which people would also ask me for their diet plans, by the way, when they're stood on the scales and they're ripped, and I would sometimes, depending if I knew the person, I would make a joke and say, well, do you not know the difference between a tomato and a cake? You're not going to make weight eating cake. You're not going to make weight eating cake.
And you don't need your diet plan to know that.
And you don't need a diet plan.
Exactly. Yep.
The reality is if you want to be as ripped as that person on the scales there, you're going to have to do the things they did, and somehow find happiness in it. And if you can't, then maybe it's not for you. And maybe we have to kind of get to a point where we accept that. I mean, boxers and combat athletes are weird because they enjoy getting punched in the face, which is a really, really strange phenomenon, you know. Right. Like they just enjoy it more when they hit the other person, you know. So it's a kind of cost of business with them, you know. Hit me, I actually enjoy it because I'm going to hit you even harder.
Right.
Anyway, I'm a firm believer in balance in life. I'm a firm believer in finding things that you enjoy and finding happiness in food, or finding happiness in a nice fine glass of wine, or going somewhere for a great holiday, or and really enjoying life. I really believe in that. But we have to just be clear on the things that we say we want. Are our actions aligning us towards that? So, you know, if I want to travel to America but get on a plane to Dubai, I'm never going to get there. Our actions have to align with the things we say we want. So I firmly believe in, as I say, going and enjoying a you know, a nice meal with your partner, and we can do that and stay lean and stay athletic and stay healthy, and we can do that. But if we're doing it 3 or 4 times a week, our actions are not aligning with the things we say we want.
Yeah. When did that become clear for you? When did that become clear for Ric Moylan, at least?
Well, I think you know, as it's funny, isn't it? As a younger man, or perhaps not as young now, but you look back and I look back as a younger Ric, and I think, like many people, I would often say I wanted things. I would make throwaway loose comments, but actually my actions didn't really align with that. I'm not sure I can give you a definitive answer there, mate. If I'm really, really honest, I'm not. I think I used to fight myself, and I think that's probably the instinctively one that comes to mind, because my combat background was more as a martial artist and a kickboxer, but you still had to make weight. Now, people listening or watching won't know, but you absolutely do. I'm a bit on the vertically challenged side of life. I'm not the tallest person in the world. I prefer to say I'm a mesomorph, and I'm really muscular, and, you know, solid and muscular. However, my body type basically means that unless I really, really, really diet hard to make weight, I'm fighting absolute units, because I do weigh quite a bit. And that punch in the face as a younger person, because there was a couple of fights when I perhaps wasn't as disciplined with making weight and so forth, and I went in at the weight category higher and got absolutely battered. So I think that was probably a real realization for me, because the truth be told, I can tell the world, you know, oh, I lost that fight because of this, and this. The reality is I lost that fight because I didn't get down into a lower weight category, because I didn't do the work that was required, because I wasn't disciplined, because I couldn't, I didn't do the necessary steps that needed to get there. I can tell the world any story that I want, but ultimately I can't pass my mirror test.
Right. Yeah.
I go home and look in the mirror and I know the truth. And that is something that I'll often revert back to with clients. We want success. We want, you know, financial success, business success, sport, happiness, whatever it is. Sometimes things go our way. It's great when they do, but sometimes they don't. But can we pass our mirror test? And that is all about showing up. Do you know what? It didn't go well for me today in that sales pitch, in that call, in that really high level meeting, or that job interview that I went for to start in my first job. But do you know what? I researched the company, I read their website, I asked around, I prepared. I can pass my mirror test. Today just wasn't my day. But you know what? I'll go again tomorrow. Yeah.
I love that. I love how you bring it back around to when you kind of discovered yourself through your boxing. Because again, for me, when I ask a question like that, my mind goes back to my swimming days, and I just think, okay, when I was in it, I wasn't looking at it as joy and happiness and all this kind of thing. And it wasn't until it was gone that I was able to kind of reflect and just say, oh, like that was me. My identity was actually embedded in that weekly mirror test, as you put it. Like I truly, whether I wasn't looking at it that way, although towards the end of my career, I actually was pretty much journaling every single session that I would do and writing my thoughts down at the end of the week with how I did. And you almost do it as a practice, and you don't even think about why you're doing it sometimes. You're just doing it because you're just immersed in it. And then you look back and you go, wow, there was true joy in that. And the irony for me is that when it was gone, I then spent probably 5 to 10 years trying to figure out how the heck do I find another version of this, you know? And that was probably the hard part for me in my 20s. But I think so much of what you're alluding to here, mate, is you know, for anyone listening to this, can you start to really picture ways to create a mirror within your life? Can you start to have the routines and the habits and the personal code to where at the end of a week, at the end of a month, maybe it's daily, just to be able to say for a matter of a couple of minutes, did I pass my mirror test today? No matter the result, because again, you come from that world in boxing, I come from that world in Olympic sports of just, at the end of the day, sometimes you can do it all right. It just wasn't your day, and that's just. But to have the willingness to get back to work, we need to be able to reflect in those moments where we've maybe not gotten the result we wanted, and say, well, what was my process? Was my process something I can be proud on and hang my hat on and say, yes, I did all I could? Chances are, if that's a yes, if you tick all those boxes, as you say, you're more likely to come right back into another training cycle and not even think twice about it. You're going to get back to work because you notice that. And we need that. We need that in any industry, in any world that we're operating in. But mate, listen, I knew we were going to fly through this conversation. And one thing I really wanted to get to before we were done today is kind of a double-sided things. I know you've got a couple of events coming up this year. And the second event that you have later in the year with the charity boxing nights, give us a little bit of insight around that. But one thing I'd love for you to do as well is maybe help our listeners understand, and this is something you actually wrote on as we're speaking right now. You wrote on this earlier this week. Help our listeners maybe understand the power and the benefits, let's say, of committing to something that is so unusual, so far outside of our normal selves, and what that can do just for the way in which we show up in our regular world each and every day. So I'd love for you just to talk a little bit about your events, and then also give us a bit more context around just the benefit of that charity boxing night.
Yeah, I'll start with the boxing if that's okay. We had I've been in and around pro boxing for years, and there was this phenomenon in London of people who worked in city-based jobs, taking the suit or their power clothes off after work, going into boxing gyms and sort of having fights, and there's people have varying opinions of that, whether people should do that and whatnot. It wasn't to the extreme of Fight Club, but you know, right. Anyway, alleviating stress via boxing from coming out of stressful environments. Sure. Anyway, I'd looked at this sort of thing and I'd sort of flirted with, should I do one of these kind of events in Manchester, and I'd had no event experience whatsoever before, aside of running small round tables and so forth like that. Anyway, sadly, we had a really bad family tragedy in 2015. My sister went into hospital to give birth to a second child, and after 3 days of being in labour, there was some complications in the labour process, and sadly it was found to be negligence. And we have the National Health Service over in the UK, which it has got its struggles. There's no question about that, but is a phenomenal service. So this is no sort of disdain on the National Health Service. These things happen, unfortunately, but there was some mistakes that were made, and unfortunately my sister, full term with a healthy baby girl, the baby was born and sadly she wasn't breathing, and she'd been starved of oxygen to her brain. She was transferred. They'd also then, in the emergency of doing a emergency delivery, they'd caught my sister's internal organs, and she was very, very ill as well. She developed sepsis and so forth like that, and could have also passed away. Thankfully, Lauren survived. Lauren completed the marathon this weekend, just gone, which was an amazing journey for her. But after 12 days of being on what they call the NICU unit over here, which is the newborn intensive care unit, sadly baby Sophia passed away. And 12 days old, and it was a very, very difficult time for the family. When you've been on an EQ ward, it changes, in my opinion, your perspective, and you have got tiny, tiny babies the size of your hand, literally from the second they are born, fighting for their life. And I made the decision then, which was something that I tried to connect to, and with varying degrees of success, of doing a little bit of charity work and giving back, which I'm a big believer in. So I made the decision then that I was going to be a fundraiser for NICU at Royal Manchester Children's Hospital, which is a very, very large hospital in Manchester. And just out of nowhere, a few days later, whatever, I just thought, I'm going to put this boxing event on. And I had, as I say, no event experience, not much funding, blah, 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 but I'm going to find a way. And I'm going to take absolute beginners. That was my biggest thing. You cannot have had any fight experience before. You have got to be a normal person, everyday life, and I'm going to train you. I'm going to take you on a journey. I'm going to take you through the whole training camp, and I'm going to give you the tools needed to get in the ring, under the lights, and have a fight. 3 2-minute rounds, which is not a long time, but it is an absolute lifetime when you are there. It is the loneliest place in the world. So I just thought, I thought, it's called Charity Boxing Nights. I'm going for it, and I've got no idea how I'm going to do it. So I'm in I had a little gym at the time, and I'm in the gym writing on the board, sort of mind mapping, planning stuff out. And a lady that was one of our members came in, and she was a bit crazy. And I mean, no offence to that, but she was a bit crazy. And I sort of coming over, she came over, and I've got to be honest, I wasn't in a great place at the time, and I was, quite sad. We were obviously going through a lot of stuff as a family. She saw me sort of mind mapping. She said, "What are you doing?" And my immediate emotional reaction was to turn around and just say, "Look, can you just..." So I took a breath. I said, "I'm planning an event, but I'm not really sure what I'm doing. So if you don't mind, I'm going to get on with it." She says, "Well, I'm an event planner."
She probably listened to her. Yeah, she probably listened to her.
I said, "Well, that's great, thank you." She gave me a card. She said, "Let's have a chat." I said, "Thank you, but I don't have the funds to be able to work with you at this moment in time." She said, "Don't worry about that. You've just told me about your sister and so forth like that. I'm going to help you." And she did.
Wow.
And she did, and she took no money off me whatsoever. Connecting Events, if you're based in the UK, is a little plug for them. And we created this event, and this event, somehow, we managed to make it really, really good.
Yeah.
Because I've got event expertise, of course, there's no question about that.
Yeah.
But we take absolute beginners and we're very, very diligent in terms of, because you always get someone that says they've never done it before, and then we find out they have.
Yeah.
And we take them on a journey, and it's people of all shapes, all sizes, all ages, all genders. It's absolutely open to anyone and everyone, as long as you've never had a fight before. And so much so that we've raised about £700,000 so far now. We only do the event once a year. We've had a number of parents who've had children on the NICU ward who've heard about what we do, and tons of our fighters have been parents of children on the NICU ward, because they know what it's like to be on NICU. They know what it's like to go through the most challenging of times. NICU saves thousands of babies' lives every single year. Sadly, like Sophia, there's not always the outcome that we want and that every member of staff on NICU wants. We've had 2 nurses from NICU participate in charity boxing nights. One lady was over 50 years old when she participated. She cried every single session, and she said, this is her, I'm not going to use the expletives and a number of things she did say. This is horrible. But I know exactly why I'm here, and I remember that those babies are fighting way more than I am. And that was so powerful for me. We have a very close relationship with the charity in the hospital, and as the training camp is drawing to a close, about 2.5 weeks before the fight night, it's really starting to their bodies are sore, they've got families, children, jobs, sacrifices, they're getting sick of the training, all that kind of stuff. There is a little bit of a no man's land. Their friends are probably sick of them trying to get fundraising off them and all of that. And we take them onto the NICU ward. And they meet families and parents of babies in the ward fighting for their life. And it is unbelievable the amount of energy that they are deeply upset when they come out, but then the energy that brings them for the final 2 weeks, the final push, and towards fight night is absolutely massive. That, for me, I'd coached it on many times with athletes and so forth like that. That was the thing that showed me that having that thing to work towards, that challenge, that North Star, particularly when it does something that gives back to society, that gives back to those less fortunate than you are, that, for me, it's amazing to see how people can push themselves. It's amazing to see what we are all capable of. Of course, we come from a world of elite. But these people are really in their little world. And I absolutely love it. It's raised money, but also it's taken those participants on a massive journey that hopefully they've then taken into their life after the event as well.
Well, I don't think there's any question of hopefully. Clearly, and I think really where that question was around just highlighting the event is, at the heart of it, us making space in our lives for personal journeys, personal commitments that are out of the norm, but they're anchored in something that is so much greater than, let's say, just simply being able to do something a little bit better. For instance, I find that part of it so powerful, and I think that's where the personal discovery really starts to kick in. I'll be really interested to know all those folks that have gone through this year after year now, where their lives have gone off the back of it, and how they've maybe implemented change in their lives off the back of it too, because that's all I can see. But listen, mate, before we wrap up, tell us about your event you've got coming up here in about a couple months in the summer as well.
So Reset Summit is helping people find that challenge. It's helping people connect to that challenge, that North Star. In the chaos of non-stop WhatsApp groups, non-stop emails, non-stop life, non-stop business, people are tired, burnt out, stressed, all those kind of things. And what Reset Summit is designed to do is help you strip it all back. Of course, we've got to work. Of course, we've got to earn money. it's great for us to do that, and it's great for us to have purpose and focus and all those things. And what starts with that is you being the best version of yourself. So it's actually talking to busy people who sometimes get a bit lost and sometimes don't put themselves first, and then actually saying to them, the best version of you serves your family, serves your children, serves your work. The best version of you serves you. So let's get you to the best version of you, and actually the way to do that is to challenge yourself to do something. Not always pushing charity boxing nights, but you know, something like that.
Right.
It's more in its infancy than CBN is, but there's a real powerful message. It's going to be built just like CBN. There was something I missed. All of our families, all of our fighters, of former fighters of yesteryear, they enter into what's called the CBN, Charity Boxing Nights, the CBN family. And when they've fought with us, they become a member of the CBN family for life. You have no choice.
Right.
Reset Summit is it's going to be the same. It's all built around people. It's built around community. It's built around friendship. And we're in, as I say, it's still in its infancy, but we're in mid-level conversations now with a charity partner as well with Reset, because I firmly believe in that. And there's a charity partner in Manchester. Reset Summit, I potentially will take it on the road to London and places like that. And we will link up with charity partners that do something towards helping children and giving children who are not very fortunate opportunity, and giving them that thought of, I can do anything if I put my mind to it, and then to add your caveat on, but then do the work as well.
Do the work as well. And all that, I'm going to get all that information in terms of links and things like that from you after we're done, and I'm going to make sure all that's available in the show notes for folks to be able to access. But what I always enjoy with these conversations is when we can tie it back into where we started. And an hour ago, I asked you what it means to be growth ready, and you spoke to, seizing opportunities and taking them when they show themselves. And whether it be in 2015 with what happened with your sister, or as recently with what you're doing with Reset Summit, life in some way, shape or form, sometimes tragic, sometimes opportunistic, has presented you with reasons to take a step in, to lean in, to give it consideration. And you've not only given it consideration, you've been a student of what it is you've preached to us in this last hour of, doing the work and doing the boring, doing the ugly, doing the stuff behind the scenes that allows you to have these very successful evenings and events that you've been able to produce here in the last 5 to 7 years. And it's been wonderful as a fan of yours, as a bystander, just watching this from afar. And this is a conversation I've been looking forward to and wanting to have for many a year. And I think we're having it at the right time. And I'm glad to have done this with you today, mate. And honestly, with anything and everything moving forwards, I hope that our listeners, follow you and look into some more of these offers that you have and these events that you're providing. But as far as I'm concerned, mate, I'm just wishing you well, and that you've got not only a fan in me, but someone who's willing to contribute whenever the opportunity arises. So just appreciate everything you brought to the show today, mate.
No, thank you. Likewise, and thank you very much for having me on the show. It's like you say, this was the right time, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
My thanks again to Ric for joining us on this episode. Again, like I alluded to there towards the end, Ric and I have known of each other for over 10 years now. And when I started my podcast back in 2018, he was one of those folks that it would have made a lot of sense even back then for him to come on. And here we are now 7 years later having that conversation, and definitely the right time for us to be having it. Definitely filled with the types of insights that I know for anyone listening to this, no matter what industry or world you operate in, there's value in everything that we were able to discuss in that episode. But what I want to leave you with is your mirror test. I really want you to get serious about this, and just simply start by asking the question, what can I learn from myself that has happened the previous week? Am I willing to step into a state of reflection? Am I willing to work through a journal? Am I willing to simply look at a body of evidence of the work that I did versus the work that I did not do? Can you start to get into the habit of doing exactly that and taking the all of maybe 10 to 15 minutes to do that work at the end of the week? Do you have that time? Are you enough of a value to actually make that time for? Think about that part of this. If you're not making the time to reflect and execute the mirror test, it's another way of telling yourself that you're not worth the time, that you're not of enough of a value to yourself to warrant protecting that time and doing an exercise like that. Reflection is so powerful. If you struggle with this idea of doing it over the course of a week, do it daily and make it even shorter. Find a couple of things that you're specifically focused on improving within your world every single day, and just ask yourself, maybe scale yourself on a 1 to 10. How well did I do with it today? Was I able to execute those 1 or 2 items that I want to start executing consistently? You can't ignore the reflection in the mirror. It's the beautiful thing about the mirror. But you need to make time to do that work. And if you do, the beauty of that is that you start to better understand what you're putting in so you can better understand what you're getting out. My thanks again to Ric for joining us. My thanks as always to you for joining us and continuing to listen. If you are new to the show, subscribe, for crying out loud. You don't want this to be the one and only time you listen to this kind of content. It's too good for you to miss out on. So make sure you are subscribing. Make sure you're taking the time to share the episode with somebody within your world. Be generous about these insights. Don't keep them all to yourself. Now, come on, be generous. And finally, make sure you're leaving us a rating. Click that 5th star in the Apple Podcast. Click that 5th star on Spotify. Take the time to thumb up us on YouTube. Whatever it is, all the things. Make sure you're leaving a rating. Make sure you're letting us know how much you enjoyed the episode. Again, as always, best of luck to anything and everything you're doing within your world. And I look forward to doing this again with you very soon. Bye for now. Thanks again to Scribe for sponsoring the episode. And remember to head to scribehow.com to automatically turn your processes into a step-by-step guide in seconds. So stop answering the same repetitive questions and work 15 times faster by heading to scribehow.com and start working faster today.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.